There we go. Just make one more check, and we are indeed live. Double check that the notification comes through there. Yep, we are indeed live. Welcome to the Wednesday of Super Bowl week. Apologies that this video itself is later than usual. We tried to do this at about 5:30 of a day, but as you may or may not be aware, if you follow my wife on TikTok, I'm pretty sure I've shared some stuff of hers on there. But she is starting a new job on Monday. Very proud of her for it, and we just need to get some new clothes for her because it's the first time she's been in an office for a job since the pandemic. So there's a whole new wardrobe that needs to be purchased, and we managed to get it done in relatively quick time, but not enough for us to get this show at its usual time. I also want to apologize for not doing a show yesterday. But again, as I explained on my TikTok, on my story, I was at the Pittsburgh Riverhounds game, covering the start of their preseason, so that took up a large chunk of the day, and it just wasn't feasible for me to get to do a live show on Tuesday, which we like to do, but again, sometimes real life gets in the way, and it did today and yesterday. But nevertheless, on with the show. And where shall we start on my little docket that we have here? We'll start with the biggest team, and I suppose it's really the biggest name. And the biggest news is coming out today. And that is according to Josina Anderson, well-respected NFL reporter, that the Dallas Cowboys, now we've spoken to them about them before in regards to their defensive coordinator search, and I said that I was really a big fan of the way they were handling it, of trying to get a former head coach in because of all that entails. You've got the defensive experience, but you also then have someone with the authority of a head coach that can control the room rather than an up-and-comer who might still be a little bit wet behind the ears and might not command the respect. A bit like, and I don't want to say anything negative about him, but I'm just picking a name out, for example, but like a Kellen Moore, for instance, who was quite young, didn't really do that well in the NFL. What's he doing, or how does he guide an offense? Is there still a little bit of respect that needs to be earned? Hang on, just got to remember, I've got to turn the light on. There we go, much better. How much respect can he earn from veteran players? It's all that sort of thing. So getting a head coach, or former head coach rather, to do that was a great idea. They've interviewed or spoken about Ron Rivera being a name and Mike Zimmer being a name. But now we come to an arguably, at least in the coaching world, an even bigger name, because according to Josina Anderson, the Dallas Cowboys have interviewed Rex Ryan to be their next defensive coordinator. Now, my first thought about this, when I first saw about this, was to double check to see if this was a spam account, because Rex Ryan coming back into the NFL is just something I was never expecting. I always thought he was pretty cushy with his analyst job at ESPN, and he's doing a pretty good job at it, it must be said. So I didn't think he was necessarily going to be willing to take the jump back. But as we've seen, there have been a number of people who've gone, who have spent some time as an analyst and then decided to jump back into the game, most notably John Gruden, when he went from the from the Raiders to the Buccaneers, and then he retired, went to ESPN and was a commentator for Monday Night Football, and then went back to the Raiders again. So it's not unprecedented by any means, but still a little bit of a surprise that some analysts decide to jump back into the game. And Rex Ryan is obviously the latest one to be see his name in that light. Now, after I'd rubbed my eyes to see, double check, right, are we sure that Rex Ryan is actually going to be considered as a defense coordinator position? It kind of struck me that, this is, if we're going along the lines of Ron Rivera and Mike Zimmer, if that's the sort of baseline that we're going with for former head coaches wanting to take that step back and be a defense coordinator, if that's the level we're going at, Rex Ryan far exceeds Ron Rivera and Mike Zimmer. I'm going to take a look at his numbers here. These are from Pro Football Reference. Now, these are his days as both defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens and as head coach of the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills. And I'm looking at his defensive numbers here. And this is in terms of years. So in the 2005 season, he ranked, and I'll go yards first. So 2005 starting off, and then yards. So 5th in yards, 1st in yards, 6th, 2nd, 1st, 3rd, 5th, 8th, 11th, 6th, 19, 19. That's from 2005 to 2016, again encompassing defense coordinator with the Ravens, head coach of the Jets and the Bills. And then in terms of points, 10th, 1st, 22nd, 3rd, 1st, 6th, 20th, 19th, 24th, 15th, 16th. So when it comes to being a defensive coordinator, again, large part of that would have been helped out by the personnel. Let's not forget, with the likes of Reid Lewis and Ed Reed there, but he still managed to, coordinate them and get the best out of them. So not a total, they say anyone could maybe, run an offense if you give them enough tools. Like anyone could run the 49ers offense if you give them the weapons they got. Similar sort of thing here, but still not to be deterred. Rex Ryan, very, very good record when it comes to being a defense coordinator and running the defense as a head coach. So when you look at the Dallas Cowboys defense, just as they are right now, looking for that next little bit to say, right, can we, maybe get some more takeaways or can we get more pressures or whatever, just to get that little extra time. Rex Ryan, of the names that we have spoken about, is the best option in terms of their footballing credentials, is the best option. I don't think there's anyone that can really deny that. My issue with Rex Ryan being the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys is that he's too much of a sideshow. I think with his personality, it sort of works for a head coach. Someone who has to go out there with the media every week and is the main focal point of the main point of contact between the team and the media. It sort of works as a head coach. I just think as a defensive coordinator, his personality and his way of communicating, and let's just say as well, because it's well documented his personal life. I'm not going to bring it up here, but just Google Rex Ryan feet. That's all I'm going to say. But anyone who knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about. And if you don't want to know what I'm talking about, then I don't blame you at all. But just his personality and his demeanor, it would come across to me as a bit of a sideshow if you were to take the role of defense coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. It just it would be a constant distraction, not to the same level of Taylor Swift with the camera cutaways, but you feel that the TV cameras are going to be doing the same thing with Rex Ryan. And that's not what you want for a serious Dallas Cowboys team that is serious about winning Super Bowls now. You do not want and you do not need that added distraction of a big media personality and who's got friends in the media, so they'll be talking about him a lot, of Rex Ryan. You just don't want it. Again, footballing acumen, I'm not denying that he would be a great fit in that sense. Maybe if he was going to be defensive coordinator for, I'm not going to say this, but a lesser branded team or a smaller branded team, and I'm not going to be rude to anyone, but basically any one of the other 31 teams, not the Dallas Cowboys, not the big, most valuable brand and the star now, what you associate with the Dallas Cowboys, just no. Again, be the defensive coordinator for the sake of arguing with the Atlanta Falcons. Go for it. In terms of scale of how big they are and like prestige and whatever, the Atlanta Falcons are way down. By all means, go for it. Just not the Dallas Cowboys. I just don't think they can afford to have any more of a media circus on top of what they already have, being the Cowboys, with bringing Rex Ryan in. So, unless you can make that sort of the agreement in the make that an agreement in the contract that you will maintain the level of professionalism and you will not, cause us any sort of embarrassment or anything. If they can get that in the agreement, then go for it by all means. But I just don't see Rex Ryan being able to calm himself down and be less of a character, shall we say, with the Dallas Cowboys. So that's the only thing that would sort of put me off if I was Jerry Jones and going the whole hog and making the appointment. So that's the Cowboys over with. Who should we move on to next? I will move on to Brock Purdy. And again, this sort of goes on to the legacy discussion that we've been having a lot about, a lot of players and coaches indeed, around this Super Bowl and what it would mean and how big it would change how we perceive a lot of the players in the Super Bowl this week. And the latest one to come under, I'm going to say scrutiny, in a weird way, is Brock Purdy, quarterback of the 49ers, because Cameron Wolfe went on to Good Morning Football on the NFL Network and basically made a bit of an interesting comparison between Brock Purdy and likely Hall of Famer Drew Brees. And I don't think he did make some comparisons to like their size and their playing style, because they're both relatively small for the quarterback position. They're both incredibly accurate, although you could sort of break it down that Brock Purdy's is more short to mid-game, whereas Drew Brees had one of the best arms that we've ever seen. But it was more to do with shaking off a stigma, if it was, when it comes to what they can do. And we know we saw this conversation with Drew Brees who was coming out, is that he couldn't win the big game. Is that yes, we can see how talented he is, but he couldn't win the big game. And now the discussion about Brock Purdy is, could this one Super Bowl do an awful lot to change how we perceive him in terms of winning the big game? Because we sort of would have had that conversation last year, but he was brought out in the first early on in the NFC Championship game. So we never really had that discussion. I still maintain that the 49ers would have beaten the Eagles if Brock Purdy was there rather than going to, was it Josh Johnson? I think was the quarterback. Whoever it was. I think the 49ers beat the Eagles last season. So, but we haven't had that discussion, but now we can have with Brock Purdy again. And the discussion was one Super Bowl can basically change how we see Brock Purdy. Because he is still getting that game manager tag a little bit. I will admit I do sort of give him that tag as well, just because, again, the weapons he has around him and the style of play that he works with, which you can't really blame him for. That's part of the Kyle Shanahan system, as it were. So it's not all his fault, but he does still have a little bit to prove. Whether or not we're asking too much of him, given his last pick in the draft status, and this is still his second year. If you want to say it's harsh on him, fine, I could somewhat understand. But if he were to win this Sunday, what does that say to you moving forward when it comes to Brock Purdy and how you look at him and the 49ers offense as a whole? See, he does go out and have 350 yards. I'll just pick a number out. 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. And 2 of them are deep bombs to Deebo Samuel, say, or Christian McCaffrey on a long way around, say. 2 long passes are in there. And they win the Super Bowl. Doesn't that change how we immediately think of Brock Purdy? And we start to think, right, maybe he is an actually good quarterback. And it's not just, the pieces are around him. If he can come out and win the Super Bowl and put in a good performance as a result of it, all questions surrounding Brock Purdy are basically null and void moving forward. He is now the franchise guy. He is now going to be worth whatever the big bucks are when his contract comes up for renewal, which will be which you'd imagine would be fairly soon. I would not be surprised if they don't sign into some big extension this offseason, just because of the way his contract works and wanting to get ahead of the curve, because they only have his rights for 4 years rather than 5, rather than having the 5th-year option that you get with the first rounders. But even so, just think about that. If Brock Purdy goes on to win the Super Bowl, do we not then maybe start thinking about him in the same vein as Patrick Mahomes? Because we saw how early on Patrick Mahomes got his, was seen as, could win the big games and was in big moments. In his second full season, he was in the Super Bowl and he won it. Brock Purdy's second full season. And then we start to think of, right, if the 49ers can keep things together, can Brock Purdy start to catch up in terms of Super Bowls and moving forward? One win changes a lot about how we see Brock Purdy. Now, this isn't necessarily like, would a third, Peyton Manning, for instance, how big of an impact of his legacy would winning a third Super Bowl be to just winning 2? It's not quite the same with Brock Purdy, but it does still change in a huge way what we're going to think about him and how we address him moving forward, because he'll no longer be game manager if he puts on this big performance and wins it. He'll be changed pretty much for life. And, maybe he'll start being given more consideration in wider fields, rather than having to say, it was just the weapons that Kyle Shanahan had. It was, and he's only good at short part. If he can go out and put in a big performance, he'll change all that. So just one thing to be careful of and be wary of. Keep a track of Brock Purdy's numbers, because they are gonna have a big say in how things look moving forward. I guarantee you that much. Right, moving on, and we'll stick with the Super Bowl teams. Actually, no, that one's a bit weird, so I'll say that to later. We will move on to Brock Bowers, who, for my mind, is probably the tight end rather with the most hype coming out of college in quite some time. Now, I know Carl Pitts was sort of seen as a great phenom and everything, but I don't think there has been a tight end specifically with as much of a track record and as much hype surrounding him than Brock Bowers has. from his day, from the University of Georgia. Ever since the tight end position has changed and formed and amalgamated with the Rob Gronkowski and how he sort of changed that you can have a tight end as a number one weapon, all the way down to George Kittle and Travis Kelsey of today. In fact, I'm just going to take a quick look at something just whilst I talk. But ever since the tight end position has changed, no tight end has come out with as much hype and expectation, shall we say, than Brock Bowers has. Obviously, a lot of that is down to the team he plays for. The fact he's has been with the best college team of the past couple of years in the Georgia Bulldogs. Renowned for their defense mostly, but do still have a lot of good players on the offensive side of the ball as well. But let's see here. So let's get his full college numbers. So 26 touchdowns over the past 3 years. That's pretty good. 800. So what are we looking at? Around 1,500, around 2,400 yards as well receiving for a tight end. That's pretty damn good. And a lot of people are expecting him to go high. But how high is he going to go? Well, if you were to ask him, he'd be going number 7 specifically. Because speaking to Mike Florio and Chris Sims of Pro Football Talk this morning, he sort of let something slip that I don't think he intentionally meant to do, but has nonetheless still caused a little bit of a stir and has garnered some questions. Where he was sort of stumbling through an answer. There was talk about, from Mike Florio about, where do you want to go? Mike Florio and Chris Sims, rather. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be drafted by? Let me just move my mic. Who do you want to be drafted by? And he sort of stumbled through an answer before saying the Tennessee Titans. And he maybe tried to backtrack a little bit because he then went to mention that Nashville was a great town. And, he's from Georgia, from the South. There's a lot of, friendliness and what have you and similarities there. So he tried to say, because it's a great town. Either way, a top draft prospect has basically come out and told a team, come and get me. Because again, this isn't some quarterback, for instance. Well, I suppose it would be different for a quarterback, but again, this is a highly touted offensive, potential perennial all-pro here. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. Again, you look at those numbers, you look at his performance, go and look at Brock Bowers' tape. You will see why he is so highly regarded as an NFL prospect. But for someone who is likely going to go in the top 10 to effectively issue a team with a come and get me, whether or not inadvertently or not, that is going to change a lot about how the draft is handled. Because now they know, the teams ahead of them know, they aren't going to get a second chance at him. Teams that are sort of, the Tennessee Titans are picking 7. Those teams that are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, if they want him, they've got to work something out, either jumping the Tennessee Titans or trading with the Tennessee Titans for their spot and hoping they can nick him. So an offhanded comment like that could go a long way to changing how the draft is, how the draft works. And it's weird that we're doing this sort of talk about a tight end. If this was a star wide receiver, if this was Marvin Harrison Jr., many people will argue the best overall player coming out this year. If it was Marvin Harrison Jr., if this was, let's go back a couple of years, if this was Trevor Lawrence, say, when he was coming out, if this was, Caleb Williams, and we've seen all the talk about what he's going on, about whether or not he does or does not want to go to Chicago. But again, the same sort of impact. Comments like this can drastically alter how teams prepare for the draft. So Brock Bowers, again, inadvertently or not, has probably changed how a lot of teams are going to handle their business in the draft. Because he's going to be a perennial all-pro. You do not want to be the team that effectively missed on him. So are you going to wait for the Tennessee Titans to go and get him? Or are you going to try and jump ahead? Are you going to, if you're ahead of the Tennessee Titans, are you going to make sure they don't get that chance? It's interesting. Again, he's going to be a game changer. He's going to be a Rob Gronkowski. He's going to be a Travis Kelsey. Don't let him go. And if I'm the Tennessee Titans, I think seriously long and hard about how I handle, even the interviews stages when he goes through the combine and everything. Just make sure you get everything right because you've got someone there that, again, wants to come to you. Don't let him get out of your sight. And then there's one final point. This is a somewhat serious topic. We like to keep things lighthearted on here, as the description will as the description down below. Uh, um, intends, no. Insinuates, I can't remember what the word. Implies, that's the word, implies. But there was one rather weird, serious question that was handed to Andy Reid, head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, during his media availability earlier in the week. And it was from a German report. Now, I haven't gone through the whole process of digging out exactly who he was and what the outlet was, but he was from Germany. That's again become apparent all over social media, and he was basically asking Andy Reid what his thoughts were on the rumors and the conspiracy theories about whether or not Travis Kelsey and Taylor Swift is this all big Democratic psyops to try and not sway the election, but come out and endorse Joe Biden, which I suppose would sway the election in one way or another. Now, we knew that Travis Kelsey and Taylor Swift were going to be a big topic of conversation. Travis Kelsey had to deal with a bunch of questions on that matter during his media availability. And again, you can sort of understand the desire to get something out, but Andy Reid has no business answering those questions. He is not. I don't know where this guy got the idea from to ask Andy Reid this question. Again, if you want to be weird and conspiracy, but this guy is preparing for potential, I'd say the biggest game of his career, but he's had other Super Bowls, but potentially the biggest game of his career. Because again, going back to the legacy point, what's another Super Bowl for Andy Reid going to do? It's going to change the way. It's going to change the way a lot of people think about it. Maybe even put him alongside Bill Belichick in some people's eyes. He doesn't want to be involved in conspiracy tinfoil hat questionnaring and questions. So I understand there is probably no good time to ask that. You certainly can't ask him after the game. But there's no real good time to ask that question. So don't ask the question again. I understand that this is Super Bowl media week and it isn't quite what it was, and there are now like influencers that will want to have their own spin and ask stupid and goofy questions. I kind of understand that, but there still needs to be some sort of level. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw some question about, Andy Reid and his cheeseburgers. Like, that's a fun, colloquial, like, light-hearted thing to go and ask. But to ask him about conspiracy theories and the election and the Travis Kelce, no. Just no. Again, I was going to say there's a time for a place for it. There really isn't a time for a place for stuff like that. I mean, preseason, fine. If you want to have that as the last possible post to have it, then fine. But not in Super Bowl media week. Just don't do it again. I hope this isn't a question that comes up, but maybe later on, maybe Travis Kelsey and Taylor Swift are still boyfriend and girlfriend by that point, so there's still like wedding questions or. But I just hope it doesn't come up again in many media questions going forward, and asking about conspiracy theories in the election. Just no, there's a level to it. Just don't go over that level. You don't go over that level, and I won't go over time, which we are slowly approaching. Thanks very much for tuning in, and like it, even if you aren't watching live, all views and comments are very much appreciated, as is any interaction on my social medias, which are listed down below: TikTok, Instagram, and WordPress. So yeah, feel free to reach out on any of those platforms, and if there's anything you want me to discuss again, just let me know. Now, tomorrow's going to be a slightly different show, because rather than breaking down the news, obviously if there is some big news, then I will be doing that. But tomorrow I'm going to be giving my official, as late as I can, predictions for the NFL Honors Awards. Now I'm going to go back. I need to go back and find the original footage where I made my predictions at the start of the year and see how many I'm going to get somewhat right. But I just want to give basically an updated guess. Now that we've had the whole regular season to take it in, and you can sort of see where some storylines are going, which might be cheating a little bit, but I just want to see if I can get as close as I can to working out who the NFL honors recipients are going to be, just the main ones. I can't get assistant coach of the year doesn't really think to me. Walter Payton man of the year is a hard one to guess, as it were. So I won't be going into that, but the main ones like Coach of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, and all those, I'm going to be giving I'm going to give my official final predictions ahead of that show. So feel free to tune in for that. If not, again, like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you guys think about any NFL topic. And until I see you guys next time, which should be tomorrow, you guys all take care.